Hey guys, what's going on? It's Filmington, and gonna be showing off some cards today, so hopefully you guys like that. Probably haven't done that in like 10 episodes now. A little atypical for me, but hopefully that trend turns around. First of all, Hobby Guys. The Hobby Guys is strong right now. There is no arguing against that. If you look at pricing data across all the sports, across all the eras as well. And if you look at transaction volumes, those have been quite high. I think towards the end of March, the beginning of April, prices started to creep up, and a lot of sellers have since then tried to take advantage of it. They've started to list cards, and the prices have held pretty steady. In some cases, they've increased more. So this is a great thing. Again, the hobby is strong. You could maybe argue against whether it is sustainable, but for right now, it is strong, guys. Another thing I noticed, this is sort of old news, 89 Upper Deck Griffey. It was easily had for $650 in January, probably $500 last year, and now it is up to $1,500 in a PSA 10. And as a rub-off effect of that, a lot of the other stars from the 90s, one example would be Frank Thomas, his 90 Leaf, the most iconic rookie card of him, I would argue. That increased about 3x as well. And that's, what, about a $300 card now, I think. And you have seen some of this ripple effect happen within the player, too. So I know Ken Griffey Jr.'s score rookie card is probably about 2x what it was early this year. So it might not have seen the same 3x significant increase growth as the 89 Upper Deck, but his other rookie cards have done quite well as well. So one of the things that I thought about from this is what's happening with the 80s and 90s, this isn't a fluke. And this is something that we all should recognize for what it is. Because generally, the people that come and leave in this hobby, or the types of people that are responsible for some of the newfound interest which has occurred over the last 6 to 8 months, talking about baseball here, a lot of those people aren't going to be too interested in the 89 Upper Deck Griffey or the 90 Leaf Frank Thomas. And the reason for that is just because it makes for a little bit more difficult of a quick flip. Of course, you can't say that now, but generally those guys are going to see a steady climb in prices. There's no hype. There's very little volatility. Their careers are sealed, and they're not going to be in the news. There's not going to be really much hype around them. So generally, the flippers, a lot of the people that came into the hobby recently, maybe from sneaker flipping, maybe from the base PSA 10 surge that happened with Gary Vee, and a lot of people that came in from maybe sports betting that can't do that anymore right now, or fantasy sports, a lot of those people probably are going to have a shorter time horizon, and they're probably not going to be messing with those cards from the 80s and 90s. Generally, the people that are going to be buying, investing in the 89 Upper Deck Griffey and the 90 Leaf Thomas are going to be those that maybe rediscovered the hobby, but those that have serious passion for baseball, those that collected when they were a kid. And these types of people generally are more sticky to the hobby as well. So, and this shows, and this is really two things. There's two parts of this. There's the fact that the owners of those cards and the people that have ultimately driven the values up of those cards are predominantly collectors. Maybe some of them have an investment-oriented mindset, but these aren't the pump and dump type people. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is that in the broader scheme of things, the ratio of collectors to investors and flippers is actually quite more palatable than what I initially thought. And that is good for the long-term sustainability of this hobby. So you have the hobby being strong, and this is in the midst of a pretty serious economic softening. And there are many factors why the hobby has been a little bit isolated from the economic softening, such as e-commerce, still being able to do that. It's one of the few hobbies people can still have, unemployment money. So there's other factors too. But just the fact that the hobby has been able to be as strong as it has been in this economic mess, it makes me think, like, is there any type of recession scenario that could really take down the hobby right now or in the immediate future? It makes me feel very much more optimistic about the hobby 3 to 5 years out. And that has, in effect, changed the way I've invested. So you'll see pretty soon I'll show these cards, and it's involved me reallocating some money away from modern cards into more longer-term cards, a little bit safer, but these do have bright investment prospects as well. So looking at the Ken Griffey Jr. scenario, the Frank Thomas scenario, I was trying to think, okay, so how can I capitalize this? I clearly missed the run-up of these two. How can I take advantage of this scenario, but with a different card of a different player? And I naturally thought of Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds. Roughly, the same era. These guys started a little bit sooner, but generally we're talking the same generation. The difference, or one of the main differences, is Frank Thomas and Ken Griffey Jr. Not only were they very good at their sport, but they were very well liked, very well respected by fans, by teammates, by the media. They had really strong reputations. I think probably 25, maybe 50% of the kids that I grew up with, they idolized Ken Griffey Jr. Their favorite player was probably Ken Griffey Jr. They had his jerseys and stuff, and they idolized him. They emulated his swing when they could. Easier said than done if you're not left-handed, but then you look at Barry Bonds, you look at Roger Clemens, and not only are these guys not very well liked, they're actually on the opposite spectrum of that. Barry Bonds was, especially for the latter half, I guess, of Bonds and Clemens' career, hated by other players and by fans and by the media. And then the steroid scandal, you could go a little bit deeper. Roger Clemens, he was accused of beating his wife. Barry Bonds, at one point, was accused of evading, of tax evasion. And so in a way, they're similar because they both put up very, very good stats. In a way, they're very different because nobody likes Clemens and Bonds. Then I thought about something else. The Hall of Fame, Griffey and Frank Thomas, they've been inducted. They've already seen that surge because of that. Usually with players 12 to 18 months before they're expected to actually get inducted, that's when you start to see that run up in cards. And I don't think that same premium has been necessarily baked into the values of Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens cards right now. Probably for good reason, because I think there's a better chance they're not in the Hall of Fame within 18 months. Right now, they've already been on the list in front of the BBWAA, which is the Baseball Writers Association of America. They've been on the ballot for 8 years. They have 2 more to go. They need 75% of the votes to get there. And if you look at the trajectory, it doesn't look that bright. At first, they got up to 50% by year 5, but over the last 2 to 3 years, they've kind of stalled out. Now, if you look at other players, it's not always a linear climb. And sometimes this can be a case where it's relative to who else is on the ballot. But in Larry Walker's case, you can see that, okay, he's here, he's there, then all of a sudden he's in. He just jumped, and he got in. But I don't know if you can bet on that in the case of Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens. We're dealing with about 400 writers. Most are, not to bring ageism into this, but most are a little bit older. They're part of the same generation. And to their credit, one of the criteria of voting for a Hall of Famer has to do with sportsmanship. Has to do with ethics. And guess what, guys? Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds undoubtedly failed the test there. But something that I think a lot of people aren't realizing is that there's another way to get into the Hall of Fame. If Clemens and Bonds don't make it in, they're in their first 10 years, then there's something called the Modern Era Committee. It used to be called the Veterans Committee. And it's a group of 16 individuals, and 12 of them have to vote the player in. And that's how Lee Smith and Harold Baines got in recent years. So it's not a guarantee, but one of the things that came up with the writers is if you took the ballots of those that publicly disclosed who they voted for, a lot higher of a percentage actually voted for Bonds and Clemens. It was, I think, around like 60, 65%. It's not 75%, but it goes to show you that it is viewed as a more ashamed behavior to not vote for those two guys than to vote for them. So having said that, going back to the Veterans Committee, they have a shot. It wouldn't happen until 2 years after the 10th year. So we're talking 2024 at some point. Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens would have a chance to be voted in by the Veterans Committee. And I don't know necessarily if it's going to happen at that point, but I think at some point there's a greater chance than not, whether it's 2024 or later, that Bonds and Clemens are in the Hall of Fame. For Barry Bonds, it is, in my opinion, the 1986 Topps Traded Tiffany PSA 10. Now, he also has a regular Topps Traded, and the key difference between those two cards, other than print run, which with Topps Tiffany, you're looking at a print run somewhere between 5,000 and 30,000. 30,000 was a print run in 1987, people think, with Topps Traded Tiffany. But the main difference between this and a regular card is going to be the glossiness of the Tiffany front, the brightness of the cardstock on the back. There's also an asterisk, a star or two in the, I think the bottom left of this card if it wasn't Tiffany. So be careful if you buy this raw. A lot of people try to pass the regular Topps Traded off as Tiffany. It's a very common thing. And got this one too, but I really like the way it looked. I like the centering. It's one of the keys with this card. You compare this with 89 Upper Deck. You're going to get, because the borders on the left and right are wider on the Topps Traded, you're going to get cards in PSA 10s that are still either 60-40 or 45-55 that are going to have centering that looks whack. With the Upper Deck, because it's a thinner border, it won't be as noticeable. With the Topps Traded and with the next card I'm about to show you guys, it's going to be pretty recognizable. So pop on this card is 440. It's about an 18.5% 10 rate. So it's not impossible, but it is fairly low. Maybe not relative to other cards from that era. With the regular Topps Traded card, it has I think a PSA 10 pop of around 4,600. So a little less than 10% Tiffany versus the regular Topps Traded. Bonds has a lot of other rookie cards. The Flair Update card, I've been told, is actually in the PSA registry, where the Tiffany might not. But collectors, investors from the beginning have always loved Tiffany. You could go to any message board and ask, what is the best Barry Bonds card to invest in? Or where should I start? And yeah, there are more rare cards. There's short prints or error cards. But 5 out of 5 times, they're going to tell you the Topps Traded Tiffany. It's just a more iconic design. It's Topps. It's more short printed than 86 Fleer. You know, there's also, of course, the 86 regular Topps Traded. Maybe that card is very popular too. But I think that if that goes up, then the Tiffany will have to go up as well. Now, there's also 87 Topps, 87 Fleer, 87 Donruss. Those cards are not bad. And they're actually pretty tough to gem. Each one has their own issues. But they're from 87. Why pass up on 86 when you don't need to? And again, this was behind my whole idea of reallocating some money. This isn't just new money. This was modern money poured into some older stuff. And I just feel like this gives me access to maybe higher returns and a lower level of risk with this era of cards. If the baseball card market goes sideways, if it gets a lot worse than it did in early March, then I don't think these cards are going to fall as much. I don't think they have the downside risk a lot of the modern cards I have. And that even includes some of the Trout rookies I have. I mean, I tried to get the best centered copies that I could of all these. You know, I think maybe one is better than 55-45, and it might be this one. It was just that, you know, the ones that I was looking at, these truly were the best copies I felt that were reasonably priced. Now, funny enough, I think the card that actually has the best corners is Beckett. And a lot of people think that Beckett, well, it's almost a known thing that Beckett is just more lenient on corners as well as edges. Some people would say surfaces as well. Some people would say just vintage cards altogether. But this card's got 4 9.5 subs. I wouldn't have bought it otherwise. It's got pretty strong corners from the back. It maybe has one of the cleaner backs. So happy to pick that one up as well. If it was me, I'd pay a little bit more for a nicely centered copy left to right. Left or right, I think, matters more with the Bonds card because top to bottom is more difficult to discern. And naturally, you're always going to look at left or right first with most cards when you judge centering. I would pay 10 to 15% more probably if I could for a better centered copy. And the next card, we talked about Clemens. Now, Clemens does have a Topps Tiffany card as well. It has a super low print run, a super low PSA 10 pop. It sells for over $3,000. It's a little bit less attainable than what I'd want for a card that has like a potential to have that 2 or 3 times leap in a rather short time period, even if it is 2 or 3 years from now. And it's a no-brainer to me. It's another card, again, that collectors have decided is the card. For him, it's the true rookie card. It's from a set that has been sought after and well-liked and coveted for decades, and that is the 84 Fleer update with Clemens. So, similar PSA 10 pop with the 84 Fleer update. You're looking at $548. This one's tougher to gem, guys. It's about 11% of cards that have gemmed. Print run, nobody really knows. People speculate between 15 to 20,000. That's really just a guess. So this one's even more attainable than the Bonds Topps Traded. You can get these for hopefully under $1,000 still. I did. I sent a bunch of offers out to people, and some of those people responded by just jacking up the price, and I didn't make a deal with them. Some people will tell you that his only true rookie card is from 1984, which also helps. And again, people just love this set, 84 Fleer update. This is another one. Pay attention to centering. One of these, this one looks awesome, even top to bottom. It's just a beautiful card. Edges are really nice. Corners are nice. And it's in the new flip, which also helps, in my opinion. Some people might argue against that and pay a premium for the older flips, and I get that logic too. Won't have to go into that here, but this one, top to bottom, is a little bit off, but left to right, I love it. And again, it's got thicker borders than the 89 Upper Deck Griffey, so it could still be 60-40, but it'll look bizarre on a PSA 10, okay? So comparing this to the 89 Upper Deck Griffey, nobody really knows the print run of that. Some people might speculate $1 million. The Griffey card could actually have a higher print run than the entire rest of the set, which is kind of crazy to think about because you have the low series and the high series as being offered as different products. But population of that 89 Upper Deck Griffey to PSA 10 is 3795, and that's about 5%. So a pretty low rate, but still you have almost 4,000 of those copies in circulation. Where with the Bonds 86 Topps Traded Tiffany, you have a PSA 10 pop of 440, and with that update, Roger Clemens, it's 548. So it's definitely harder to get. Will it ever be as desirable as that Griffey card? Probably not, just because of that factor of the likability, blowing bubbles, striding so nonchalantly in the outfield, just very graceful catches he made, and he could do it all, guys. Barry Bonds could do a lot too, but he wasn't everybody's favorite player, and I don't think that's ever going to change. But having said that, I do think that there is a lot of potential with these cards. These cards right now are selling for about double what they were maybe 4 years ago. So while they have increased over the years, you haven't seen that big jump like what the Griffey and the Frank Thomas did. Actually, if you're to look back in the early 2000s, these cards actually sold for more at one point. And to be fair, this is before the PED news to some extent, but between the years of 2004 and 2008, that 84 Fleer update, Clemens sold between $1,000 to $1,500 routinely. And with Clemens, I think the steroid stuff really started to come out strong around 2006. And with the Bonds 86 Topps Traded Tiffany in a PSA 10, between the years of 2004 and 2005, that card would routinely sell for over $2,000. So, you know what? Their records are never going to be completely untarnished, but I think at some point they could even double those previous highs. Again, you know, we're talking about two different worlds. Not that many people collected cards in the early 2000s. Look at what we have today, guys. All right, guys, that is all for today. Maybe you don't agree with me. That's okay. I understand. But this is what I'm running with. There's never going to be any easy, quick money. And with Bonds and Clemens, you kind of have to write it out. But let me know what you guys think. Like, comment, subscribe. Filmington out.